Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's episode, I have got Daniel Särefjord from Aira heat pumps, and we met back in, I think it was May now, wasn't it, Daniel, at Everything Electric in Harrogate. Just before I properly say hello, Daniel is the CEO of Aira UK and the Group CCO of Aira Group. But thank you for joining me. It has been a while, but you're such a busy chap, aren't you?
No, thanks. It's a pleasure. It's been a while, but really looking forward to a great discussion.
Absolutely, and I think there's going to be a lot that people can learn on this anyway. So I always do this. I always talk about how people came to the job that they're in now, and what was it that you did in your background, you know, your previous to Aira, that brought you to where you are now.
Right. So I think I have spent I'm an engineer by training, and I was a massive computer science geek growing up. So I was absolutely sure I was going to become a programmer. But I've ended up spending my entire life in basically services, working with selling, servicing, maintaining customers in different service industries, from telecom to home security. And the last 10 years of my career before, or 9 years I think, before joining and being part of founding Aira, I spent with a company called Verisure, which is the European leader for home alarms.
Okay.
And interestingly, the home alarm industry looked very much like the central heating system and plumbing industry 30 years ago.
Okay.
And by the way, I should say how it also looks very much today, with maybe the exception of Aira, in the sense that it was a very disjointed and fragmented industry with sort of manufacturers of things, wholesalers, distributors, and then tens of thousands of local locksmiths and electricians doing bits and pieces. So getting a home alarm system was really complicated, and it costed several £1,000s getting it installed. And then if you wanted it monitored and for something to happen when the alarm went off, you had to manage that yourself, finding someone to take care of that and guarding and so on. And what Verisure did was to sort of realize that in reality, people just want to feel safe and secure, and they want, they would love to have security as a service. So someone to just take care of this whole end-to-end experience, developing great products, marketing and selling them, installing them, and then monitoring and taking care of me as a customer and keeping myself and my family safe and secure. And I was part of it, really scaling that company from, I think we were 5,000 people in the company when I started, and almost 30,000 people after when I left. So really a massive growth over Europe and South America. So I had seen firsthand how, let's say, business model innovation in an traditional value chain or traditional industry, how it could really have a phenomenal impact on how people picked up and sort of got to benefit from, in that case, feeling safe and secure. And what with that experience, what was so interesting, and it was I was contacted from our founders, and they had been looking into residential heating for some reasons. First of all, our founders it's an impact investor or a company creator that builds companies that that in segments or industries that need decarbonization, sort of hard to abate kind of industries that need decarbonization. So they are in transportation with batteries, they are in steel, and the next sector they looked into was residential heating, because it accounts for 10% of Europe's total emissions. In the UK, it's even more, it's 15, 16%. But interestingly, in Sweden, it's 1%.
Oh,
And I
is
think
it?
having grown up in Sweden, sort of we almost couldn't understand this data. So it was sort of a really interesting data point. And when you sort of double click on why is that, the answer is really simple. We don't use gas and oil to heat our homes. We use heat pumps. And interestingly, Scandinavia is sort of, is really an outlier compared to the rest of Europe there, where 1 to 2% of all of Scandinavia's emissions come from heating, and it's all down to heat pumps. And then when we sort of tried to understand what is it that, what could we do to accelerate this? Why is this? And our hypothesis, or what we have built Aira around, is very much that this is the same sort of very fragmented and disjointed industry where there are manufacturers of products, there are wholesalers of plumbing equipment, and there are distributors. And here and now is if someone's gas boiler breaks, they will ask for a new gas boiler. And if I'm a plumber, I will give them a new gas boiler. That's how it works. So really, we felt that this sector is never going to decarbonize if we just develop a new product. Because that product already exists. Everyone in Sweden is already using it. Somehow, it's just so that, I think there are between 1.5 and 2 million boilers being replaced every year in the UK. And it's not like UK families are sort of, oh, you know what, I'm going to make a terrible choice for the environment and I'm going to put in a new boiler. They do
Yeah.
it because they don't know that there is a more efficient, more environmentally friendly, and actually cheaper alternative. And they just go to their local plumber and say, my boiler has broken. Can you please help me? And the plumber comes and says, of course I'll help you. I'll put in a new boiler. So the whole idea behind Aira, and it was a really long answer, sorry for that, but
No.
we
Hey,
could
no, I'm happy.
we could really see that this business model of building an end-to-end sort of one-stop shop where we develop the products, we manufacture the products, but we also build a specialist organization that becomes an expert. So when your gas boiler breaks, in reality, we don't see it as a gas boiler breaking. We see it as your central heating system broke, and you now need to replace it with a new central heating system. And it just so happens to be that the best central heating system you can replace it with is a heat pump. When I grew up, I think my parents threw out their oil boiler when I was 4. So,
Oh my
so
God.
in
Oh my
reality,
God.
and I obviously don't remember what that oil boiler looked like. The only I know
Yeah.
in the basement, I know where the tank used to be because there's now a void where the tank used to be. But but that's the only thing we know about boilers. After that, we have had electrified heating and we have had low carbon heating, and I think that also means that we have, as Scandinavians or Swedes, the experience of what it means to roll out this technology, at scale with quality. Because I can tell you that winters in Sweden are much colder than winters in the UK. So we know
Yeah.
both that heat pumps work and how you install heat pumps so that they work in harsh climates. And we think that we can build sort of a really nice business that both has positive impact for the climate and also builds, a big business with careers for next generation careers for lots of people who are now possibly in the oil and gas sort of trade and can move into sort of renewables, and that will be a really nice business and hopefully a really nice legacy that we can be really proud of.
Because I remember when we were in Harrogate and you were talking about the gas boiler engineers, and am I right? Do you offer free training to them to
Absolutely.
actually upskill them with, with a view to installing for, installing aero heat pumps.
Yes, no, exactly. So we have in the UK, we actually just had the inauguration of our second Aira Academy. Was it last week or two
Oh,
weeks
excellent.
ago? So we now have
Yeah.
one academy in Sheffield, training our sort of people, let's say in the from Midlands and up north, all the way up to
Yeah.
Scotland. And then we
Yeah.
have one in the south of London, so basically training the southeast, include well the south, let's say. In reality, 90% of the work that is done when you install and maintain a central heating system is the same regardless if you work with gas boilers, oil boilers, or heat pumps. What's different is the way you design them, because the design of heat pump systems, in order to get more efficiency, you try to lower the temperatures so that they are more low temperature heating systems. So where an oil or gas boiler may have 60, 70, 80 degrees scorching hot water running through the radiators, which is partially why it's really inefficient, and also partially why it's actually not very comfortable. I mean, as a Swede now, seeing a gas boiler for the first time when I moved to England of the age 40, it's either full blast or it's nothing. So your temperature at home goes like this,
Yeah.
whereas I think a heat pump is very much like this, Volvo station wagon that just mile after mile after mile, nice and steady, sort of slow and steady, I guess, wins the race. It just keeps an even temperature. It's not as fast, but it just keeps and maintains an even temperature. And and this design, we need to teach people how to think about how you design these systems differently, what you need to think about in order to but at the end of the day they have most of the skills that they need. I mean, in the UK we have more than 100,000 gas certified technicians, and we are absolutely certain that we can easily and we happily convert those and add the skills needed so that they can continue with these careers in central heating systems, but in a in a sustainable way also for the decades to come.
So the two academies that you've got then so far are you converting people who are already installing heat pumps, or are you, I suppose my thinking is, how are you educating these gas
Yes.
technicians in
Mm.
order, because lots of, like you said, they're more likely to automatically gonna go, oh, your boiler's broke, get another one,
Yep.
rather than, so how are you doing that? How's that messaging
Right.
working?
So first of all, we are employing gas technicians and converting them to what
Okay.
we call clean energy
Oh, get
technicians.
you,
So
getting
we
you.
actually have our
Ah.
own workforce. We don't necessarily use contractors, which is also we believe it's a really important part of our value proposition in the sense that
Mm.
today, I mean, think about it like this. So today, plumbers, your local plumber, super skilled, but they will spend 95% of their time doing oil and gas and maybe 5% of their time doing heat pumps. So even by giving them more training, it's really valuable, but it will still be an activity that you only do, one out of 20 days if it's 5% of
Yeah.
your total work.
Yeah.
Whereas we are building a workforce that all day, every single day, they only install heat pumps. And I
Right,
think
I get you.
it's a if you go to the gym once per month versus going to the gym every day, the results will be quite different. Not because you were
That's
necessarily
very true.
better or worse in as a starting point, simply because you train a lot more. And this is what we believe will make a difference in the future. I mean, we want obviously these 1.5 to 2 million gas boilers that are today being replaced. We believe that whether it's 5, 10, or 15 years from now, the number of gas boilers being replaced should be zero, and a vast majority of those 1.5, 2 million will be heat pumps. And then having built a workforce that is a specialist all day, every day heat pump installer will have, will provide massive value in that transition.
So, okay, so how, I know you kind of said that what's coming through the heat pump is basically water, forget my teeth in, it's heating up the water that you have in your
Yes.
radiators.
Mhm.
But, and I have seen, and I mean, I've said this to you before, your heat pumps, if there was a word, if there was a word for sexy, they are quite sexy. Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether anybody would agree with me thinking that a heat pump's sexy, but yours are very, maybe elegant might be
Mm,
the word, for I've worked in manufacturing and service for a long time and I've seen
mm.
all sorts of weird kind of thing, but that actually yours are quite elegant in the way they look. But how what needs to happen for people to have these installed then? Obviously, you're taking the boiler out, like you said at home, you had that gap where the boiler was. In fact, where I'm talking to you now from the podcast room, it just happens that my my boiler's right next to it's in the corner.
Yeah.
But for us, how would it work?
Right. So again, for an absolute majority of people, you just exchange the heat source. So whatever, if you have a gas boiler heating your radiators today, you can have a heat pump heating your radiators tomorrow. Uh,
Mm,
a heat pump compare and then obviously it depends on whether you have a combi boiler or which many people have today. Then you have gotten rid of your hot water cylinder, so you're producing hot
yeah.
water as you need it. A heat pump does not work like that. A heat pump needs a hot water cylinder, so it either heats your home, hits the radiators,
Mhm.
or it heats the
Mm.
hot water in a cylinder. So you're
Okay, so
going to
we've got a
need
cylinder still.
a space for a hot water cylinder. Now, luckily,
Yeah.
even the people who have replaced sort of their old boiler and cylinder with a combi normally have space where it used to be. So then we need to convert that
Mm.
back.
Mm.
And apart from that, you need a hot water cylinder and the actual sort of indoor unit. It looks a lit. It's not very different from. You either have them all in one, we call it, and then it looks a bit like a refrigerator. So it's a box that looks like a refrigerator, and the size of it can differ
Mm.
depending on how much hot water you need. Alternatively, you can
Okay.
separate these things. So you have the cylinder someplace, and then you have what basically the brain of the system that more or less looks like a boiler. Then you need an outdoor unit as well, because the way a heat pump works is that it's more or less a refrigerator in reverse. So just like a refrigerator takes heat out of the refrigerator to lower the temperature, we are taking and harvesting heat from the air outside, compress it, and move that heat from the outside to the inside. I, that's what we sort of tend to call the heat pump magic. And if I go on a tangent like that, so basically, and it might be worth, still most people don't know really how a heat pump works. But the
No,
magic of a
exactly.
heat pump is that when you heat your home with fossil fuels, for every unit of energy you burn, so 1 kilowatt of energy, whether it's oil or gas, will be converted into between zero point 0.6 and zero point 0.9 units of heat, because some of it gets lost in when the flame is
Yes.
burning. Not everything gets converted and
Yeah.
runs through
Yeah.
your radiators. So we call that these heating systems are 60 to 90% efficient.
Okay.
The and then if you use direct electric or resistance heating, you will get 100% electricity, so efficiency. So every kilowatt hour of electricity you use, you will turn into 1 kilowatt hour of heat in direct
Yeah.
electric heating. So direct
Okay.
electric is a little bit more efficient than boilers, but electricity, as you know, is quite a lot more expensive than gas. So it
Mm.
ends up actually,
Mm.
unfortunately, being quite a lot more expensive than gas or oil heating to use direct electric heating. The beauty with the heat pump is that instead of using the energy, the electric energy, directly to heat your radiators or your hot water, it uses it to run a cycle of compression and basically a bit of clever technology where it uses the electricity to harvest energy from the outside and compress and move that energy to the inside. So with every unit of electricity I run the heat pump with, it is able to harvest and move 4 to 5 units of heat from the outside to the inside. So actually,
Okay.
it's 4 to 500% efficient if it's well installed. And this is the magic, right? So it's so much more efficient than if a family uses 20,000 kilowatt hours of gas to heat their home, which is what we used in my terraced house last winter. With a well-installed heat pump, I would use 4,500 kilowatt hours of energy. So 20,000 kilowatt hours of dirty gas would be substituted with 4,500 kilowatt hours of electricity, of which, by the way, more than 50% of it is already renewable. So already not releasing more carbon. And obviously, if I had solar installed on my roof, if I have a gas boiler, that solar will never help me heat my home because I'm using oil and
Yeah.
gas for that.
Yeah. We've
If
got
I have
that. Yeah.
solar on my roof and I use electricity to heat my home, then this 4,500 kilowatt hours of energy, I can even use the green electricity I have produced myself to heat my own hot water and my home. So again, I go off tangents, but this is what the outdoor unit does. So you need an indoor unit, which is basically the hot water tank and the brain of the system, and then you need an outdoor unit, which is basically a big fan and a compressor.
Yes. Yes.
And obviously then you need some space outside to put this unit. So that is something you need today that is not necessarily needed when you have a gas boiler. Obviously, for people who heat their homes using oil, many of them have a big tank outside, so they already have space, sort of. And the outdoor units are not big. I mean, they are the size of the boxes that you have your cushions in if you have outdoor furniture. That's the size of
Yeah.
unit you need to
Yeah.
find a place. It's the size of 2 bins. Um, and but if there's space for that, and if you have space inside for a domestic hot water cylinder, then you can heat your home with a heat pump.
So we've actually got that. We have actually got that space. Well, we've kind of worked out that there's a laurel bush around the back of our house that could go. Because from what I understand, am I right that if you've got for the fan for the actual heat pump itself for the outside unit, as you're saying,
Yep.
you need a fair bit of space from the unit so that it actually does get enough air circulating. Is that right?
Yeah, but not necessarily a lot. I mean, we're talking. It needs to have, let's say, about a meter or a little bit more than a
Oh,
meter. And then if
that,
it's a
oh,
really enclosed area, I mean, then obviously there will be circulation issues. But if it's quite close between you and the neighbor, as long as there is air circulating, there will be no problem. I think that we very rarely find challenges finding a place. If you have a garden or if you have, we will find a place for that. Today, unfortunately, in the UK, what holds many people back is that if you need a slightly larger unit, you unfortunately need planning permissions, which is one of the sort of ridiculous rules that are holding back the adoption of clean energy or clean heating in the UK compared to the rest of the world. Really, there's nothing like that in Germany where we operate. There's nothing like that in Scandinavia. There's nothing like that in Italy where we operate. And you can basically put in a huge jacuzzi in your backyard. No one can complain about that. You can build an extension of your house, but you can't put a fan
that seems
in
ridiculous.
a small
So is
box.
it I was going to say, is it just an exception that is on the plan, kind of like in the local authorities that say
Yes.
if it's
Yeah.
this, then you're okay, but if it's that, then you need to have
Ex-
planning permission.
And I think it probably sort of relates to how 20 years ago heat pumps were less efficient and more noisy. So they could create
Mm,
sort of a nuisance. But now, I mean, a modern heat pump has the sound level of a refrigerator. So think about installing a
yeah.
refrigerator outside. I
Mm,
don't think your
mm,
neighbors would. I think a jacuzzi will make a lot more noise, especially with people in it, than putting a
yes.
box outside. But these are sort of rules that I'm absolutely certain will change. I mean, I'm sure that people with interests, vested interests in gas and oil, will try to make it take longer. But it's one of those changes that just have to happen, and until it happens, unfortunately, it's holding back. It forces lots of families to make poor decisions in terms of how and when they replace their heating system. But as it's being, but I'm sure it will improve.
But I mean, there's now incentives, aren't there? There's kind of government incentives, I suppose, actually providing those for the. I mean, they were there before the new government came in, but
Yes.
actually looking at the negativity versus the government incentives. So the negativity, I know I read a report from DSmog which actually
Mm.
highlighted where some of this stuff was coming from,
Mm.
some of the negativity was being paid for, but not go into it too much. But
Mm.
actually, surely the incentives have got to start outweighing that negativity when people can see that other people are actually getting them. Is that making a difference yet?
It is making a massive difference. So I think, and it's easy to talk about the things that don't work, and planning permissions, requiring planning permissions for almost half
Mm.
of families who want heat pumps is really one of those things that is holding development back.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah,
in the UK we have the bus grant, so the boiler upgrade scheme, which is a
yeah.
£7,500 grant that anyone who owns a house and replaces a fossil fuel based heating system with low carbon heating systems, so a heat pump, can get. And that's actually,
Mm.
I would argue, one of the best. And by the way, this is what 30 years ago what really drove the Swedish transformation from oil heating to low carbon heating was actually government incentives to get the snowball rolling. So this is
Right.
really what we see both in the UK and across Europe, and I would argue that the UK system for it is really good. So as a, you know, we are obviously a large installer now, and the system is fairly easy to use. It's fairly quick. It's
Mm.
sort of good at well administrated. So I think that is, and this £7,500, it actually, for many installations, it takes away the big difference between installing a new boiler and installing a heat pump, so that yes, a heat pump system is still more expensive, but it's not, many orders of magnitude more expensive. It's a few £1,000s more expensive than getting a high quality boiler. And most of this is that the first time you put in a heat pump, you need to make adaptations of your whole central heating system. So you might need to upsize the radiators, you might need to change some of the pipe work. You just need to change so that the central heating system is adapted for a heat pump instead of a gas boiler.
Boiler. Yeah, yeah.
But that's a one-time investment. So the next time, 20 years down the line, when you get your second heat
Mm.
pump, you will not have that. Then your system will be sort of heat pump ready. And then I'm sure we will have comparable costs of heat pumps versus what people pay for boilers. I think the other really interesting thing about this is from a total cost of ownership perspective, and from me coming from Sweden, I mean, here in the UK, since we have lethal gas coming into our homes, and we use sort of burning flames to keep the
Yeah,
radiators warm, we
yeah.
pay fortunes for maintaining and servicing these systems, which is obvious, which is obviously required. If you have lethal gas coming into your home, you need to control that it does what it should do, because the consequence if something's wrong could be lethal. Same thing, but a heat pump is actually it's a low temperature electric device, not more lethal than your toaster, which actually means that they require a lot less maintenance. I mean, in Sweden, most people have their heat pumps checked every 4 to 5 years. Someone comes and kicks the tires and makes sure that it works, which actually means that, and normally they just come and have a look at it, might clean a filter, and then say, let's see each other again in 5 years' time. So you actually save a ton of money on the maintenance of the system, simply because it doesn't have an 800-degree burning flame that is constantly on. It's a low temperature, just sort of always on type of system. So it does mean that you will save. Yes, you spend a little bit more when you buy it, but you will save over time from it just not requiring the same amount of maintenance.
But if we also go back to what we've been saying about those incentives, those government incentives, you as an organisation, so Aira as an organisation, you have got a very different pricing model, haven't you?
Yeah,
Which is kind of enabling people who wouldn't normally be able to afford the difference in the incentive price to the actual heat pump price to actually have
exactly.
one. Can you explain what that is?
Right. No, so you're absolutely right. We are, again, it's part of this whole idea of an end-to-end sort of, think more of it as heating as a service rather than as a product. So when we sell heat pumps, again, part of our sort of founding idea was to try to understand what is holding people back from buying heat pumps today. And obviously not knowing that heat pumps exist is a big reason. So just marketing and pushing heat pumps is a big sort of drive that we and others are pushing. But the other sort of more practical things that hold people back is that a heat pump costs more than a gas boiler, and I think the average price in the UK is somewhere in the £13,000, and then the government grant takes £7,500 off that, but you're still left with a few £1,000s more than a gas boiler. And let's face it, most families don't have a few £1,000s lying around. Even if it would mean that that investment would pay itself back several times over simply by running more efficiently than so it does create this divide that the people who have money can buy better technology and save even more money, and the people that don't have money, they get stuck with old technology that's going to cost them more. Now, the way we address this and the way the electric car industry has addressed this is that most people could never afford to buy an electric vehicle cash, right? Which is why most people lease their vehicle or finance their vehicle and pay it as a monthly fee instead. And then you can benefit from the lower fuel costs and so on, which will actually mean that it would cost you less to have an electric vehicle, even though it costed more to buy than to have a combustion engine car. We think exactly the same way about heat pumps. So we offer customers to finance the heat pump so that they can pay as a monthly fee instead of as an upfront cost. Now, the other thing that we sort of, it's not just the financing. The other things that were holding people back, especially here in the UK, were two things really. So one, doubt whether heat pumps work or not when it's cold. And I think this is probably, it's the reason for this is twofold. So one is probably just intuitive. When it's cold outside, how can there be enough heat to heat my home? I mean, if it's -5 outside, how on earth could that air hit my home? I think that's intuitively complicated to understand. Just, and even as an engineer, that's why we call it the heat pump magic. But in reality, the absolute zero when there's no energy is minus 270. Is it 273 or 276? So the absolute zero. But anyway, there's a hell of a lot of difference between minus 5 and minus 270. And all this difference means that there's lots of energy in the air outside when it's minus 5. And the heat pump just cleverly concentrates that so that it ends up being, 45, 55, 60 degrees of hot water in your home. But people have a sort of, it's hard to understand this. And then I think the other dimension besides it being hard to understand is that, again, there are vested interests that would love for you to question whether it works or not. And
Of course they would.
it
Absolutely.
always makes me giggle, since Sweden is not unfortunately known for its really hot climate. It's rather known for the opposite. And I can tell you that I have lived in old, poorly insulated houses. I've lived in new houses. They've all been hit by heat pumps. They've all managed to. We've all survived minus 20 days during the winter with sort of heat pumps. So we know it. We know they work. But it does mean that as part of our proposition, we offer a comfort guarantee. So if you buy a heat pump from us, we guarantee that it's going to sort of keep the temperatures that are required by the MCS, which is the standard that regulates. So it means sort of, 20 degrees in most rooms, even 22 degrees in some rooms, and 18 degrees in bedrooms and so on. So at the coldest day of winter, we guarantee that the system is designed to keep these temperatures. And if it doesn't, we fix it for free. And if we can't fix it, you'll get your money back. So it's on us to make sure that the system works. You shouldn't have to worry. If it doesn't work, get another boiler. But, hint, hint, after 40 years of Swedish winters, we know they work.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
other dimension is people know how much money they're spending on servicing their boilers. So they know that they can spend hundreds of pounds every year servicing boilers. And naturally they think, if I'm going to spend a few £1,000s more on a heat pump than on a boiler, am I also then going to spend hundreds of pounds more maintaining my heat pump than my boiler? That's people's immediate fear. So that's why also Aira heat pumps, they come with a 15-year warranty. So actually, whatever happens during the first 15 years, it's on us. So it's in our interest when we sell the product that you're going to have as few problems as possible for the next 15 years. Which is, of course, the complete opposite of most companies' business models, where they make more money over the next 15 years than more problems they have.
Yeah.
So this is what sort of makes Aira different. You pay for it as a monthly fee if you want, and we take full responsibility of the product during the first 15 years. Normally a heat pump lasts longer, but we guarantee it for 15 years, which is at least longer than what your boiler would last.
Yeah. I was going to say, so what is the difference between the kind of the incentive price, that's 7,000 odd pounds, and yours, and obviously the kind of the monthly fee. How long do you normally spread that out over, or is that over the lifetime of the unit?
So I mean, we use a finance partner, and it's really up to the customer how long they want to finance it on. And it depends. Obviously, financing is not free, so the sooner you can pay it off, the better it will be for you. But we offer financing. I mean, let's take Germany as one example. In Germany, we offer 15-year financing. In the UK, as just generic numbers, you can get 10-year financing on renewable technologies. So you can finance it for a very long time, which means the monthly fee will be sort of very, it will be more in line with your Sky subscription than something else.
Okay.
And this is really
Okay.
what makes heat pumps accessible. This is why we believe, so we don't want to make it a choice between taking your family a week to France or wherever you go and getting a heat pump. We want to make it sort of something you can pay every month, and your heating should just be taken care of. You should have no worries whatsoever. Your family will be kept warm, your children will have hot showers, and you shouldn't have to worry about it.
But you're talking, so the system has got a 15-year warranty that you
Yes.
will support all the way through,
Yes.
even when that person's finished paying
Yes.
the kind of the
Absolutely.
difference.
No, absolutely. And if you move from
Wow.
the house, we will sort of the new person moving into that house will still benefit from that product warranty. Um,
Gosh.
so, and I think it's sort of again the reasons we so business model innovation is sort of one of the dimensions how we are trying to change the industry today, and to
Mm,
again
mm,
solve the practical issues that people have. And one of the ways we achieve this is through technology. So historically, a heat pump, it used to be a mechanical product, just like a boiler. It's a mechanical product that sort of in the case of a boiler, it's literally a burning flame that just
mm, mm.
is continuously burning in the back of your home. And it's not a very intelligent product. So someone comes and checks it every year. An Aira heat pump is a connected clean energy tech device. So actually, all of our heat pumps are connected to the cloud. We continuously monitor them. So rather than having technicians going out to your home every single year, not only being a nuisance to you, but also obviously costing the business lots of money, we are doing this with artificial intelligence and sort of central remote monitoring capabilities so that we can see, okay, this heat pump actually seems to require someone to come out. And by identifying errors early, you can fix them much cheaper than letting things go too far.
Yes,
And
it's proactive.
instead of going to visit you as a customer when everything works, like we do today when you have your annual inspection, normally they don't have to do anything.
Mm,
We can avoid that cost, and you can avoid taking that time off work. And we just, we con- every second we check that your heat pump works because it's connected. So
so
that's
we're
also
looking at,
it's a way to use technology, right? And it's the same as
yeah.
most electric cars now. You don't take them to the shop unless the car tells you that, you now need to take me to the shop to get something done, because the car is intelligent. Whereas before you had to take the car to the shop, and the guy there, the mechanic, checked things to see whether something needed fixing or not.
Mm,
Now it's a
mm.
computer that does that job for you all the time, and you only have to go when you have to go.
I suppose we're looking at, it's kind of proactive and proactive maintenance rather than reactive kind of maintenance, isn't it? I suppose it's not even maintenance. It's
It's,
kind of,
it's basically remote monitoring. So just
yeah,
making
yeah.
sure that systems are working as they should all the time. Compressors are doing what the compressors are doing, the temperatures are what the temperatures should be, and so on and so forth. That's something we can check remotely. And if something's wrong, by the way, most of the time we can fix it without visiting the customer as well. It's something we can change the setting sort of remotely. Um,
Okay. And can have you got? So you said about planning permission,
mm,
which obviously I know it's got a timescale in itself, hasn't it?
yeah.
But I don't know what that timescale is. But on average, if you needed just the single unit, and can you just kind of remind me and let everybody know what the size of the house is that the single unit will heat
Mm,
versus the double one, which kind of heats
which
a
requires,
bigger house.
right.
But what do those time scales look like? And
Mm,
actually, do you know what? How does the admin look like when you're applying for all of this funding? Does it come to the consumer? Is it you that does it?
mm,
How does that work?
right. So first of all, the sizing of the heat pump is critical. So doing that right is something that you just need to get it right for the system to be efficient. And
Mm, mm.
every house is different, and fabrics are different. Some houses are leakier than others. So I can generalize now, but before we sell anything, we always send a technical surveyor to do a proper room by room heat loss calculation so that we actually
Right.
get the right size unit to the right house. So I want to say that I can generalize now, but every house is different, and to get the right unit, you should have a professional come and do a proper sort of assessment. And that's included in sort of our service, but it's also included in lots of other providers' service. But to generalize, you can say that, in a modern house, I mean, a modern, well-built house, you will be able to serve a 200 square meter house with a single fan unit, so that does not require planning permission. Now, in older houses, it might be that it's sort of 2 to 4 bedrooms, then you're in the sort of single fan unit size territory. And if it's 4 or 5 plus bedrooms, so let's say 200 square meter plus or 175 square meter plus, then you're in sort of double fan territory. Again, if it's a 15 house from the 1500s with single, houses are very different, especially here in the UK. So you have to be a bit careful. But that's so let's say up to a 4-bedroom house, then generally you'll get away with a single fan unit, so not requiring planning permission. And in the 4 to 5 bedroom and up, you will have a double fan unit, which today requires planning permission. But we do all the administration, and so that's sort of part of our proposition, that we'll help you with the planning permission. So we'll do all the drawings, and we'll do so even customers that need this administrational nightmare, which I'm afraid it is, we will help them take care of that administrational nightmare. And every council is different. Some are fantastic. Some are unfortunately not fantastic. Some are really quick, have a process that takes weeks. Some will take a year. And there's no standardization around this. And they will ask for different things in different ways. But again, we do believe that will not continue in perpetuity. That will get better. So I think anyone who lives in a big house, just wait, it will get better. And same with the government subsidies. So we manage that on behalf of the customer. It's slightly different in Scotland. So in Scotland, the customer actually has to do it. But in the rest of the UK, we manage the process for the customer. And obviously in Scotland, we help the customer, but legally they have to do it. So obviously...
Gosh, do they?
Which unfortunately also makes, the Scottish process much slower. And the challenge with that, again, I started today's conversation with saying sort of every year, I think there are about 23 to 25 million gas boilers in the UK. And every year, 1.5 to 2 million of them get replaced. Which is actually a fantastic thing, because if we wanted to decarbonize, we could do it really quickly. We just need to make sure that we don't chuck more gas guzzling stuff into the system. However, about half of them, so between sort of 750,000 and 1 million, they are replaced because the old one breaks. So it means the family is without hot water and heat.
Yes.
And unfortunately, they tend to break in October, November, December. They don't tend to break in July.
Always. Yeah.
Which of course means that if the process takes more than days, as a family, what should I do, right? I can't wait for planning permission for 3 to 6 months and have my family without heating and hot water during the winter. I can't even wait for the MCS or for the grant application. If the grant application would take weeks, I can't be without hot water and heating for weeks. So then, unfortunately, families are forced to put in another gas boiler. And I think if you would ask families sort of, do you think it's a wise decision to put in a new device that, is an investment that ties you to gas for the next 15 years? Do you think it's going to be a good or bad decision as the world electrifies? I think most people, if they had that question, very few plumbers asked them that question, but if they did, very few customers would say, yes, I think oil and gas will be super cheap 10 to 15 years from now and will be a great investment. I think most people would say, actually, it seems like the world is electrifying and that more and more renewables are being brought into the system. The cheapest energy that we're adding to the system now is not gas, it's actually solar and wind. So people do understand that the future is electric. So it's a real shame when you're forcing people into another 10 years of gas by having processes that sort of just tie their hands.
Yeah. But what about, so if we take it back a step and just kind of think of the actual one unit,
Yep.
and that thing happens, so it gets to December and we have a cold, freezing patch, and then all of a sudden the boiler goes, and how long would it take on average, not to
Hmm.
put you on the spot or anything, Daniel, how long does it take on average to kind of like come in, do the checks, and then the install?
So we obviously try to flex capacity to where it's needed the most. So the good thing is that all customers are not in this situation, and when someone
No.
is, we try to shove things around so that we can help people. And I think our best sort of example to date is that within a week we go from customer being sort of on the hook to heat pump installed and commissioned, which is, you know,
That's good
a
going,
heat
really.
pump installation, a gas boiler replacement you can do in half a day. A heat pump replacement, given that it is a bigger, a bigger endeavor, typically takes 3 to 5 days. Um, but that means that within a week we can have all these sort of steps gone through if it would be
Yeah.
required. And I think most families, it, it's obviously not convenient, but most families could survive sort of a week without heating and hot water, at least 9 out of 12 months of the year, or 10 out of 12 months of the year.
But I mean, sometimes if you call for a gas technician, that can take 3 to 4 days just to
Absolutely.
get them out anyway, doesn't it? So, and you don't know how long it will be,
Absolutely.
for them to get the proposal to you and all of that malarkey.
Normally it is uh, a process that takes the same amount of time. So this is a problem that exists when any central heating system breaks, really. But and I
Yeah.
think what we are working on consistently, of course, is to sort of try to figure out how we can help customers. Can we put in electric fan heating? Can we do things so that we
Yes.
help customers? Maybe we don't heat all the rooms, maybe we heat some rooms for the few days that you are without heating, right? How
Oh,
can we
that's good.
help customers so that they can make this smart choice? Because everyone understands that it's a much smarter choice for the next 15 or 20 years to go electric than to go oil and gas. And obviously our job is to make sure that we sort of take away all the hurdles that are holding people back from making that decision.
I mean, and that in itself is kind of like that's added to your USP, isn't it? Kind of the fact that you're putting yourselves out to do all of this stuff to support customers. You know, so if you look at kind of how heat pump adoption is kind of moving at the moment or kind of increasing,
Yeah.
what would you like to see happen over the next couple of years, whether that be policy or more incentives or something else?
Right. So I think, I mean, put simply, I think there are three things. So, first of all, there needs to be long-term commitment to supporting the green transition. So, the challenge for any industry is when policies go like this.
Yeah.
And funding, when it's, we put in funding for 1 year. And then no
Yeah.
one makes the investments, right? Because I mean, training thousands of people, that's a business case we make based on, you know, having those people productive for the next decades. So we need longevity in planning. So I think the current subsidy scheme is good. It just needs to be, we need to make sure that it continues to be funded because there are 23, 25 million boilers and unfortunately not 23 million families who can afford to change their heating system to a much better one. So
Yeah.
longevity in the funding is one really important bit. Planning permission is, I would say, the next one. So we truly need to remove every administrational barrier that is holding people back
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
making these decisions. Third one is in the UK, the cost of electricity in relation to gas is twice as high as the European average, and it's 4 times as high as in Sweden. So
God blimey.
in Sweden, electricity is cheaper than gas. In the UK, electricity is more than 4 times as expensive than gas.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
So
Yeah.
even though heat pumps are more than 4 times as efficient as gas boilers, people save 10 to 20%, 25% of their cost. And then when you combine it with smart electricity tariffs, and that's probably what drives that innovation, you can drive savings up to probably 35% compared to gas. But in Sweden, even without any tariff or anything, you'll save 75-80% of your energy bills by getting a heat pump, simply because oil and gas and electricity are about the same price.
Yeah.
And this is very much driven by taxation, and where actually electricity, even though it's predominantly green nowadays, is paying 9 times as much tax as gas. So the tax on electricity is actually higher. The environmental taxes on electricity is higher than the cost of gas.
I mean, that's madness, isn't it?
It is
Because that's
madness.
madness with
At least if
you've got.
it's madness from an energy security perspective. So even if you don't care at all about the climate, you couldn't care less. It's still madness, because it forces you, or it slows down the transition into a more energy secure system. But obviously, if you do care about the climate, which most of us do, it's also really unfortunate, because people, when they have to choose between eating and heating, or making good choice for the family or a good choice for the climate, they will always choose the family or their immediate interests now,
Yeah.
if they are not really wealthy, and then you can afford to make that type of choice. But most families aren't, unfortunately. So that's huge, and it just has to improve. And again, it's not like the UK. Unfortunately, it's the worst in Europe. So it's not that it's just a little bit bad. We are truly the worst country in Europe when it comes to what is called the spark spread, or the spark gap. So what we pay for electricity in relation to what we pay for fossil fuels.
So is it? So I remember talking to somebody about the decoupling of the prices or something like that. So that if I might be wrong, you can probably tell me, but you decouple the prices, and then you can actually start ma- making sure that the fossil fuel gas actually increases, so it's more beneficial for people to kind of go to electric and kind of do it. So because if we're going to incentivize people to move to
Yeah.
heat pumps, we've got to do something like that, haven't we? We've got to make electricity more affordable and gas more expensive. And I know that obviously, like we've talked about vested interests before, they're not going to like it. But actually, we've got to do this, haven't we?
There are, I'm not a policy expert, I should say, and there are certainly different ways of doing it. But I can just say that when you put basically all your environmental taxes on electricity, when in reality electricity is 50% renewable and increasing every single month, and then you have gas that is 100%, dirty, there is
Yeah.
something wrong. So you need to decouple those environmental taxes from electricity or gas. Alternatively, put them on, polluter pays is a word that I've learned since, or a concept I've learned since I moved to the UK. Unfortunately, the concept doesn't seem to be very well connected to reality when it comes to how we price energy. So that's at least a start.
And we could have a lot longer conversation about why that's been, but possibly outside of this when we've stopped recording. But okay, so right, I'm gonna ask you a final question here. So actually, if you right, this is going to sound really corny. If you had a magic wand, I know we've just talked about what you'd like to happen. What would you like to happen now, like this very minute?
I think it would be, if I can ask for one thing, it would be
Yeah.
to create an even playing field on the taxation of energy, so that heat pumps and basically all electrification, not only heat pumps but also electric vehicles and other
Charging.
everything that requires
Yeah.
electricity is not penalized compared
Yeah.
to fossil fuels. I think that would be the
Yeah.
number one. And then I think planning permissions are really, and I think it seems like the new government is taking quite drastic measures when it comes to planning in general, whether it's for
Yeah.
wind and so on. So I have every expectation that they will sort of remove all of this nonsense red tape. But we can't really wait. I think this is what maybe frustrates me mostly, that it seems that everything just takes so long, and we don't have time to wait. Every single year, you know, 1.5 to 2 million families are recommitting to gas. That makes me, it's so unfortunate.
Yeah, and it could be so different so quickly, and I don't know how quick it is for the government to actually change policy or taxation in the way that we're talking about with decoupling the tax. But like you're saying, it suddenly dawned on me, actually, depending on how able they are. I think there's a lot of kind of research and kind of pieces going on, aren't they, about all of this. But to me, that is going to benefit so many people so quickly. And actually, I would personally say that will start getting the general public to recognise that the transition is real and the transition is needed, and it's affordable as well.
I think that's the thing. The beauty of electrification, both when it comes to transportation, so with EVs, and when it comes to how we heat our homes, since, you know, heat pumps are 4 to 5 times as efficient as gas boiler, it's not that you have to choose between your pocket or the planet. Actually, with a level playing field, you'll save a ton of money. That's what we need to aim for, so that people can make great choices both for their personal finance and for the planet.
Do you know, I think I'm going to end on that note, because I think that's a really, really good point to end on. So Daniel, I just want to say this has just been so enlightening, for somebody like myself, kind of starting off, and I'm hoping that other people are feeling like this as well. But actually, I started off with kind of sort of our conversation in kind of up in Harrogate, and you kind of enlightened me there. But this is just, it's great for people to hear and to find out. And yeah, thank you, really, just to.
No, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
No, it's been absolutely brilliant. And just to say to everybody listening and watching, so if you go to Aira Home, it's spelt, if you're watching, you'll see it's spelt the same way as his t-shirt, but it's AIRA home.com. And have a look at that, and have a look at that. They're quite sexy. They're quite sexy looking kind of heat pumps. I don't know what it is. They're just, yeah, attractive.
Scandi design.
Absolutely. So yeah, but on that note, just making myself a little bit of a little prat of myself, but by saying that. But hey, thank you everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, provide reviews, anything like that to boost this, because we want people to hear Daniel's story and everybody that's on this. So thank you, and I will say goodbye, and I shall see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected with us. And if you're inspired by our journey towards a sustainable future and want to support our mission on a monthly basis, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Your support really helps us to bring the latest insights and discussions in the world of clean energy, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging and sustainability to you. If a regular subscription isn't what you're looking for, you can always consider buying us a coffee. Just head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Every cup helps us to keep the electric evolution moving forwards. And if you're curious about our work in the EV infrastructure sector at Full Circle Continuous Improvement, why not visit us at www.fullcircleci.co.uk to find out more. And if you want to send me a message, you can always email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. And finally, please don't forget to share this podcast if it sparked your interest. And let's keep spreading the word about all of these topics that we're covering. So, until next time, see you soon. Bye!